On a freezing morning by the cliffs, a little girl in a wheelchair was pushed towards certain death by the very woman who was supposed to protect her. But fate intervened. A millionaire CEO, haunted by the loss of his own daughter, happened to be there. In one heartbeat, everything changed. What he did next would not only save her life, but also rewrite the meaning of family, love, and second chances. This is not just a story of survival. It's about the moment a stranger became a hero, and a broken man found hope again through the courage of a child. If you believe in the healing power of kindness, if you believe that love can rise from the darkest places, then stay with us. Because here, at Hidden Echo Stories, every tale reminds us that miracles still exist. Subscribe now and never miss the next story. The winter sky stretched in muted shades of gray, the kind of pale light that made the coastline feel both endless and lonely. Charlie Harrington walked alone along the narrow path that wound toward the cliffs. His expensive coat did little to shield him from the icy wind that pressed against his chest. He told himself he had come to this small town to find peace, but the truth was harder to face. He was running, from boardrooms, from endless calls, but mostly from the silence of his own grief. In his pocket, his hand lingered over the gold watch he once bought for his daughter. She never had the chance to wear it. Every tick of its second hand felt like a reminder of everything he had lost. Farther up the coast, in a weathered house overlooking the same sea, Evelyn Parker sat waiting in her wheelchair. Her stepmother, Vivian, tied a scarf around her neck with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Evelyn's small frame trembled beneath her coat, her legs useless but her gaze sharp and knowing. The house smelled of perfume and secrets. Her father's photographs had long disappeared from the mantel, and so had the laughter that used to fill the rooms. Evelyn had learned not to ask questions, not to argue. She clutched her old backpack, her only comfort, as Vivian announced they were going on a special outing. The sound of wheels over frozen ground echoed in the cold morning air. Evelyn felt each bump as the chair was pushed toward the cliffs. She had never liked the ocean this way, wild, angry waves crashing against the rocks below. The higher they went, the more her stomach tightened. She could feel her stepmother's hands tense on the handles. The smile was still painted on her lips, but Evelyn knew there was something sharp beneath it, something that made her grip the arms of the chair until her knuckles turned white. Charlie's steps crunched against the gravel as he wandered, his mind fogged by memories he tried and failed to escape. He barely noticed the sound at first, a faint laugh carried by the wind, brittle and false. Then came the soft, frightened voice of a child. He stopped, scanning the cliff ahead, and his heart lurched. A woman was pushing a little girl in a wheelchair dangerously close to the edge. His instincts came alive before reason could catch up. He began to run, his voice rising above the roar of the waves, calling out for caution. The wind stole his words, but he kept going. As he drew closer, time seemed to slow. He saw Vivian lean close, whisper something that froze the child in fear, and then with a sudden violent motion, she shoved the wheelchair forward. The world narrowed to the sound of metal scraping against stone and the scream of a child. For a split second, Evelyn's chair tilted toward the void. Charlie felt terror rip through his body. He lunged, his arms stretching farther than he thought possible, and his hands closed around the cold steel frame. His boots skidded against the slick earth as the wheels dangled over the abyss. Evelyn's eyes were wide, filled with sheer panic, her hands gripping the arms of the chair as if her life depended on it. Vivian gasped, her face a mask of false horror, but Charlie barely saw her. Every nerve in his body was focused on holding on. With a desperate grunt, he pulled the chair back, inch by inch, until at last both he and the child collapsed onto the ground, safe from the cliff's edge. Evelyn shook violently, tears streaking her cheeks, her small hand clinging to his as though she feared he might vanish. Charlie knelt beside her, breath ragged, his heart hammering so loudly he thought it might break his ribs. He whispered, barely able to steady his voice, that she was safe now, that no one could hurt her. For the first time in years, his words carried more than comfort. They carried a promise. Behind them, Vivian began to speak, her voice laced with panic and excuses. She claimed the wind had pushed the chair, that she had lost her grip. Her words fell flat, brittle against the raw truth of what had nearly happened. A jogger, startled by the scene, pulled out his phone to call for help. Sirens would come soon. But in that moment, all that mattered was the fragile trust that had formed between the trembling girl and the man who refused to let her fall. Charlie felt something shift inside him. The silence that had haunted him, the emptiness carved by loss, cracked under the weight of Evelyn's fear and her grip on his hand. He had stepped into her nightmare, but in saving her, he felt as though he had been pulled back from his own edge. He understood then that this was no accident, no coincidence. It was a crossing of lives at the exact moment when both of them needed someone most. The waves crashed against the rocks far below, uncaring and eternal, but on the cliff, a fragile beginning had been forged. A broken man had found a reason to hold on, and a terrified child had found someone who refused to let her go. The sound of sirens faded into the distance as Evelyn sat in the hospital room, her small body wrapped in a blanket too large for her frame. She kept her eyes fixed on the wall, refusing to look at anyone but Charlie. Even when nurses spoke gently to her, she clung to his hand as if letting go would return her to the darkness she had escaped. Charlie remained at her side, ignoring the persistent buzzing of his phone, the endless texts from his assistant, the reminders of meetings and board approvals. For once in his life, business had no meaning. The only thing that mattered was the frightened girl beside him. Evelyn's stepmother soon arrived, her voice filling the corridors long before she stepped into the room. She moved with a practiced grace, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes, a picture of frantic concern. To the nurses she spoke with sugary charm, insisting she loved the child dearly, blaming faulty brakes, the wind, anything but herself. To Charlie, however, her eyes flashed sharp with resentment, her smile faltering just long enough for him to see the truth. He said nothing, but the quiet steel in his expression made it clear he would not leave Evelyn unprotected. Detective McKinney appeared shortly after, her tone calm but firm as she asked for statements. Charlie described everything he had witnessed, his voice breaking only when he spoke of the moment Evelyn's chair tipped forward. Evelyn herself said little, but she never released his hand. When Vivian tried to insert herself into the conversation, McKinney silenced her with a raised eyebrow and turned her questions back to Charlie and Evelyn. There was suspicion in the detective's eyes, the kind born of experience. She had seen performances like Vivian's before. As the hours dragged on, Charlie settled into the quiet role of guardian. He fetched water, adjusted blankets, and read softly from a book he found in the gift shop. Evelyn listened in silence, her small fingers tracing the edge of the pages, her eyes flickering to him now and then as if testing whether he would stay. When the nurses tried to move her to another room, she pleaded in a whisper that only he could hear. "Please do not let her take me home." The words sliced through him, leaving a wound deeper than any loss he had carried before. He leaned close, promising her she was safe, and for the first time her shoulders eased, if only a little. Vivian, however, did not fade quietly into the background. She returned often, each time bringing a new excuse, a new plea, a new performance. One moment she was weeping, the next she was angry, demanding Evelyn be discharged immediately. Her perfume lingered in every hallway, a constant reminder of the danger Evelyn still faced. Charlie matched her presence with calm persistence, standing his ground each time she tried to force her way near the child. Miss Carter, a night nurse with steady hands and a soft voice, took notice. She pulled Charlie aside one evening, her eyes grave. "That woman terrifies the girl. I can see it. She hides it well in front of others, but not from Evelyn." Charlie nodded, promising he would not let the child face that fear alone. The days that followed blended into a rhythm of small acts of comfort. Charlie read to Evelyn, brought her pencils and paper so she could draw, and listened when she spoke in quiet fragments about her life at home. She described rules that kept her isolated, arguments she overheard about her father's will, and papers she was forced to sign without understanding. Her voice faltered when she spoke of her father, the warmth that had once filled the house replaced by Vivian's cold shadow. Each revelation hardened Charlie's resolve. He had entered her story by chance, but he would not leave it unfinished. Detective McKinney returned often, speaking with nurses, reviewing reports, piecing together fragments of Evelyn's past. She shared with Charlie what she had discovered: other accidents, unexplained injuries, neighbors who had once reported screams but were dismissed. The evidence was growing but fragile, like a thread that could unravel with the slightest tug. She asked Charlie to stay close, to keep Evelyn talking, to be the safe place she needed. Charlie agreed without hesitation. One evening, as snow tapped gently against the hospital windows, Evelyn handed him her sketchbook. On the pages were drawings of a lonely house, a girl by a cliff, and finally a man pulling her back to safety. Charlie's chest tightened as he studied the lines. "You are very brave," he told her, his voice unsteady. She did not respond at first, but when she finally looked up, her eyes carried a question deeper than words. "Will you stay?" He answered simply. "As long as you want me to." For a man who had once lost everything, it was not just a promise to her, but to himself. Evelyn's trust was fragile, but it was real, and it anchored him in a way nothing else had since his daughter's death. As the hospital grew quiet at night, he would sit by her bed, watching her small hand rest in his, listening to the rhythm of her breathing. The chaos of his other life, the mergers, the investments, the calls, slipped farther away with each passing hour. In their place came something he thought he had lost forever: purpose. Vivian did not give up easily. She confronted him in hushed tones in the corridor, her anger simmering beneath polished words. "You are interfering in family business," she hissed. "You will regret this." Charlie met her gaze with steady defiance. "If protecting her means regret, then I will carry it proudly." Miss Carter appeared just then, clipboard in hand, and firmly reminded Vivian that visiting hours were over. The confrontation ended, but Charlie knew it was far from finished. That night, Evelyn drifted to sleep with a stuffed toy Charlie had bought her from the gift shop clutched in her arms. She reached for his hand one last time before her eyes closed, her grip firm despite her exhaustion. Charlie sat in the dim light, his heart heavy yet strangely lighter than it had been in years. He realized the truth with clarity. He had not only saved her from falling, she had saved him too, pulling him out of the endless silence of grief. The path ahead would not be easy. He could feel the storm building, the inevitable fight against Vivian's lies and her hunger for control. But as he watched Evelyn sleep, her small face softened by peace, he knew he would not falter. The battle for her safety, for her future, was now his own. And for the first time in a long time, Charlie Harrington welcomed the fight. The winter storm broke against the cliffs like a memory returning to life, and in its fury, the truth could no longer hide. Charlie ran faster than his lungs could bear, the mud pulling at his boots as if the earth itself wanted to hold him back. Rain soaked his face, stung his eyes, but nothing mattered except the sight that froze his blood. At the very edge of the cliff, Evelyn sat trapped in her wheelchair, her small hands clutching the arms, her body trembling. Behind her stood Vivian, her once perfect composure torn away by desperation. Her hair was tangled by the wind, her voice sharp with rage as she screamed at the child, words spilling like venom. "You ruined everything. His wealth, his legacy, his love. It should have been mine. You should never have been born." Charlie's voice thundered across the rocks, carried by the wind. "Let her go. Step away now." Vivian's eyes widened, wild and feverish, her grip tightening on the handles of the chair. "Stay back," she warned, her voice shaking but deadly. "I will do it. No one will believe you. No one will know." Charlie moved carefully, his heart slamming in his chest. He raised his hands, his voice low, almost pleading. "Vivian, it does not have to end this way. She is just a child. She deserves a chance to live, a chance you cannot take from her. Please step away." For a heartbeat, the storm seemed to pause. Vivian's grip faltered, her face torn between fear and fury. Evelyn's sobs rose above the crashing waves, each one a desperate plea. Then, with a cry that was part rage, part despair, Vivian shoved the chair forward. Charlie lunged. Time dissolved into raw instinct. His arms caught the chair just as it tilted over the abyss. The muscles in his back and shoulders screamed as he pulled with everything left in him. For a moment he felt the full weight of death pressing down, threatening to drag them both into the void. Then, with a cry torn from his soul, he yanked the chair backward, collapsing into the mud with Evelyn safe in his arms. Evelyn clung to him, sobbing against his chest, her small body trembling violently. Charlie's own tears mingled with the rain as he whispered over and over, "You are safe. I will not let go. Never again." Behind them came the rush of footsteps. Detective McKinney and her officers surged forward, pinning Vivian to the ground as she fought like an animal caught in a trap. Her cries turned from denial to curses, her voice cracking as the weight of justice finally fell upon her. Evidence spilled from her car, documents forged in Evelyn's name, hidden money, proof of years of cruelty. The lies she had built her world on crumbled in an instant. Charlie barely noticed. His focus was on Evelyn, whose terrified eyes searched his as if asking whether this nightmare was truly over. He pressed his forehead against hers, steadying her trembling hand in his. "You are never going back," he promised. "Not ever." In the days that followed, the world seemed to tilt in new directions. Headlines carried the story of the stepmother exposed, of the child saved at the cliff, of the millionaire who had risked everything for a stranger. The hospital became a revolving door of police officers, lawyers, and reporters, all eager to hear Evelyn's testimony. Through it all, Charlie stayed by her side. Each time her voice wavered, each time her eyes filled with fear, he reminded her softly, "You do not have to be brave alone anymore." The trial arrived like a storm of its own. The courthouse was filled with curious onlookers, journalists scribbling notes, cameras flashing as Vivian was led inside in shackles. Detective McKinney spoke clearly, her evidence laid out like steel. Miss Carter, the nurse who had watched Evelyn with quiet concern, testified about the fear she had seen in the child's eyes. The forged papers, the financial schemes, the pattern of accidents, all were revealed under the harsh light of truth. When Evelyn took the stand, the room fell silent. She was small, her wheelchair dwarfed by the weight of the courtroom, but her voice, though trembling, was steady. She told them about the papers Vivian forced her to sign, about the coldness of the house, about the cliff. She looked once toward Charlie, and then she spoke the words that silenced even Vivian's lawyer. "She told me I was the reason she was unhappy. She said my father's love should have been hers. She pushed me toward the edge." Charlie's chest swelled with both pride and sorrow. The child who had once whispered her fears now spoke them aloud for the world to hear. The judge's gavel struck hard. Vivian was found guilty of attempted murder, fraud, and child endangerment. Her sentence was long and final, her future bound by prison walls. When the dust settled, Evelyn's father's will was read. His words carried across the years, written with clarity and love. "Everything I have is for my daughter. If she cannot have it, let it be used to help children in need." With those words, Evelyn's future was secured. A trust for her, a foundation for other children, a legacy of compassion. But for Evelyn, the true victory was not in wealth or courtrooms. It was in the home she found with Charlie. He moved them into a small cottage, filled not with polished marble or expensive art, but with sunlight and laughter. She painted her walls sky blue, covered them with drawings of gardens, of families, of a world where she belonged. Charlie made pancakes in the mornings, read stories at night, and sat by her bed when storms rattled the windows. They adopted a stray dog, Daisy, whose joyful bark filled the rooms with warmth. Neighbors came by with casseroles, children drew chalk rainbows on the driveway, and for the first time in years, Charlie felt alive. He had lost his daughter, but in Evelyn's trust, he found a second chance at fatherhood. She had once asked him if he would stay, and now his answer was lived every day. "Yes, as long as you want me to." One evening, Evelyn showed him a drawing. A girl, a man, and a dog stood beneath a rainbow sky. At the top she had written in crooked letters, "My real family." Charlie's throat tightened as he pulled her into his arms. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking. And in that moment he understood. He had not simply saved her on the cliffs, she had saved him too. There are moments in life that carve themselves into the heart forever. For Charlie and Evelyn, that moment came on the edge of a cliff, when despair and cruelty nearly won, but love refused to let go. A man broken by loss found the strength to save a child, and a child, betrayed by the person who should have protected her, found safety in the arms of someone she had only just met. From that instant forward, their lives were no longer defined by what they had lost, but by the bond they chose to build together. Evelyn's story is not only about survival, it is about courage whispered through trembling lips, about finding a voice in the face of fear. It is about learning that family is not only blood, but the people who stay, who protect, who never let go. Charlie's journey is not just about rescuing her. It is about rediscovering hope, about learning that grief can be softened by laughter, by trust, by the simple act of holding someone's hand and promising to never leave. Their new life did not erase the scars of the past. There were still nights when Evelyn woke crying, still moments when Charlie felt the ache of his old loss. But those shadows no longer defined them. Instead, they became reminders of how far they had come, of how strong love can be when it is chosen freely and fiercely. Their cottage filled with drawings, with pancakes in the morning, with the bark of a stray dog who became part of their family, was proof that healing is possible. Proof that even from the darkest betrayals, light can rise again. And beyond their walls, their story reached others. Letters poured in from children who found courage in Evelyn's bravery, from parents who found hope in Charlie's devotion. Their tale became more than their own. It became a reminder that kindness is powerful, that love can rewrite even the harshest stories. As we leave this chapter, let us remember that what saved Evelyn was not wealth or force, but a single choice: to care, to reach out when it mattered most, to hold on when letting go would have been easier. Each of us carries that power, to be the hand that saves, the voice that comforts, the presence that makes someone feel less alone. If this story touched your heart, let it be more than a passing tale. Let it be a reminder of what you believe in. Here, at Hidden Echo Stories, we share moments like these, moments that remind us that love, kindness, and second chances are real. Subscribe to our channel, stay with us, and let the next story inspire you, move you, and maybe even change the way you see the world. Because somewhere right now, another story is waiting, and it might be the one your heart needs most.